Hello, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where we educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guests may not represent those of the host or the station. Folks, I am so excited. I get excited about every show I do. And this is me. This is real. And I'm excited today because I have a wonderful guest on who just touched my heart, and he has a great story to tell. Before I tell the story, I want to tell you about my guest. My guest is Joe McQuillen, who lost his son Christopher in a canoe accident in 2016. And this podcast I want to dedicate to the memory and the life of Christopher McQuillen. Joe wrote another book before we're going to talk about this book called My Search for Christopher on the Other Side. The book we're going to talk about, and we might talk about both books, We're Not Done Yet, Pop, My Lessons from the Other Side. Joe McQuillen is a dad, married, and he found out he was on a journey to find out how he could connect to his son Christopher on the other side. And I can't wait to hear Joe's story, so I want to welcome Joe McQuillen to Chatting with Betsy. Welcome,
thanks,
Joe.
Betsy. I look forward to chatting with you. How's that? I appreciate it, and thanks for the nice opening.
You're welcome. I just love talking to you before we did the intro. So I always ask every author that comes on, Joe, what motivated you to write your book? We're Not Done Yet, Pop, My Lessons from the Other Side.
You know, Betsy, I didn't know I was supposed to write the first book. You know, what happened is after, and I'll tell you the story in a bit, but the transition, so what caused my son to cross over to the other side, and I don't like using death because I don't believe we die. I don't think energy ever dies. Spirit never dies. So I didn't know that prior to January 3rd, 2016. You know, I might have thought that or had a feeling. So I didn't know I was supposed to write one book. And I thought I was accumulating data and medium visits and such so that when I was an old man or older than I am now, I'd be sitting on a porch in a rocking chair smoking a cigar and reading these notes so I'd feel closer to Chris. You know, but I think Chris and Spirit had an entirely different plan, and that's for me to share this story, his story, Christopher's story, with parents who've lost children, who kids have crossed over. So that was the first book, and then the second book, I was finishing the first book up, and I was feeling a little melancholy, which is a great term, right? Great old Irish term. I was feeling melancholy, basically because I was afraid that maybe, you know, Chris and I had this great connection around this project of a book and speaking to parents and stuff like that, and I thought, wow, if the project ends, will our relationship dissipate or even disappear? And as I was finishing up the book, for the first book, I got a message from my son that said, "We're not done yet, Pop. We'll be doing this until you cross over." So it was a huge relief that knew that this connection that I've established with my son on the other side was going to continue until I took the step across. You know, hopefully no time soon, but you know, soon enough, right? So that's why I wrote books.
Wow, that is incredible. And I just want to tell the audience that there's a foreword by the person who heads the group. Let me get my paper here.
Helping Parents Heal, a little bit of song.
Yes, Parents Healing. Yes, thank you. And that's really a testament, you know, that you are going around helping people. And I always say to people, you know, a tragedy is a tragedy, but we can turn it into something in a way beautiful to help other people. And that's what I believe you've done, Joe, and are continuing to do.
and I think it's kind of my path, my journey. I mean, I'll read on quote the quote that you just saw yesterday that I quote oftentimes from Haruki Murakami, that said, "Once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what storms are all about." So I'm not the same person that walked into the storm January 3, 2016, when my son drowned. I'm an entirely different guy. And the bottom line is, I've been given this amazing gift of connecting with my son, but I've got to give it away to keep it. I can't hoard this like Midas's treasure. I've got to give it away to people who need it. And once again, I laughingly talked about in one interview. The host said, "What do you tell people that just don't buy into the metaphysical?" I said, "Tell them to change the channel. This is for people who need hope, need compassion, need a little comfort." And that's pretty much why Christopher pushed me to write this book with him.
That's incredible. I had to ask you, Joe, because I always ask my guest questions that I'm curious about, because I figure if I'm curious, then my audience is curious.
Sure.
What signs do you receive from Christopher?
I get signs. I get signs all the time. All the time. And it's like Einstein said, you have to approach the world in one of two ways: that everything's a miracle or nothing is. So, we can see signs and we can dismiss them if we choose. But the bottom line is, there are signs. Christopher sends me signs all the time. He sends me feathers, and he sends me cardinals. He sends his mom, his wonderful, heartbroken mom, he sends her sunflowers and hawks. And it's all the time. I had, going through a Starbucks drive-through, on his birthday a number of years back, a cardinal actually flew on the passenger side window and tapped on the window.
Wow.
And it's like, and I just looked at him and go, "Hi, buddy, happy birthday." How do you argue with that? You just have to be open. You just have to be aware. Just not, you got to get rid of the doubt that said, "Man, am I being silly?" Or, So let me flash back to what caused him. In January of 2016, he was finishing up Christmas vacation, college-age kid, and him and a bunch of friends went up to a lake house on the last weekend for a Saturday night, kick up their heels. And one of his friends, there was a dozen of them, owned this big lake house on this little lake in Wisconsin, Lake Beulah. And they drove up and shot some pool, drank too much, went back to the house. The party continued. 4 boys, 21, 22, walked outside, 3 o'clock in the morning, saw a canoe house, a boathouse, jumped in a 3-man canoe, paddled out with, half-frozen lake and Timberland boots and unlaced and layered clothing and a snootful of alcohol, and none of them made it back. I was on my way up to. I was waiting for him to come home to watch a football game with me, and I got a text that said, "Your son and 3 friends are missing, Mr. McHugh." So I jumped in the car, and halfway up, I got a phone call. It said it's no longer a search, but a rescue. It's no longer a search, but a recovery. That all 4 had drowned. Now, you go black, kind of. You kind of go into shock, and you continue the journey. But I recalled 16 years earlier, on a whim, I went and saw a medium. And most of the meeting, the session was kind of mundane, but she told me about that my dad was coming through at the very end, and he was holding a railroad caboose and saying railroad. Now, we were a railroad family. Dad worked 40 years on the railroad. All the boys worked on the railroad during school. My uncle was a railroader. My grandfather was a railroader. So that one word said to me that my old man was somewhere. And that was it. No long explanations, no stories, just the word railroad. So 16 years later, I'm driving up to Wisconsin, and I thought, if my dad is somewhere, if Iron Joe is somewhere, then Chris is with him. And I just got to figure out how to find him. Now, you got to understand, I was a car dealer. I was in the car business for 29 years. I'm not a naive guy. I'm not gullible. So I really wanted to figure out if this metaphysical stuff is real, I want to get into it. And if it's not, if it's just hokey mumbo jumbo, I want to scratch it off the list. So halfway up there, that started my quest. I said, I need to find out. I have a lot of work to do. I got to bring his body back. I've got to arrange for funerals and tombstones and receptions and readings and masses and all the things that go on in the next week. But I also said, okay, I need to immediately start connecting to see if there's a way to connect with my son. And I did. And it's not going to be I don't want to ruin anybody with a surprise, but I was able to connect with my son, and anybody listening can connect with the people that they love and who they think is lost as well.
Now, in the beginning, Joe, to connect with Chris, did you use a medium, or did
Yes.
You did?
Yeah. I actually called that woman from 16 years before. Her name was Nancy Meyer. She's a very nice woman. I like her very much, and she'd relocated to Arizona. So I called her, and it was very helpful. She told me things that I only discovered later on when the coroner's report came in and such. And she was able to connect with Chris, even though he was newly, transforming, yet he was an old soul. So it was definitely him, and I wanted a lot more. But see, I wanted to look into the face of a medium who was talking to my son. So I reached out. Bob Olson's a brilliant author who wrote a great book about the other side. He's a private eye from L.A. And he had a website that had mediums by cities and towns and then rating them. It was amazing. And I saw this guy named Andrew Anderson, so I hooked up and made an appointment. He only knew my first name, cell phone number.
Wow. And
I decided to, I wanted to go see him. So the day before, I had done two things, or the day of the meeting with Andrew. Before I went to the meeting with him, I had put on a leather bracelet that I wear all the time that Chris gave me when he was 5 in Disney World. And I, after the Disney World trip, 16 years before, I just put it in my dresser. And that day, for the first time in 16 years, I put it on. And then I had ordered shamrock seeds from Amazon. Now, we buried Chris January 8, 2016. But when the snow began to melt, I noticed he was buried next to somebody else, and I was livid, even though he bought a few spots. So I moved him over one spot, and I'll occupy the spot he was in. So I had him reinterred, moved over. So here it is in June, and the ground was still soft. So I got these shamrock seeds to sprinkle around his grave, and shamrocks still come up in the spring. And so I did those two things, put on the bracelet, spread the shamrock seeds, and went out and saw Andrew. And when I got there, it was, very warm and loving nature, and he said a couple of things about Chris and that were accurate about his personality. And then he said, Chris is saying that he wants to acknowledge you wearing the bracelet he gave you, which was under a cuff. And he said, Chris wants to acknowledge that you planted something in his grave today. That's the moment, Betsy, I went from believing to knowing that I knew this was real. Buckle up. And I never looked back. My pursuit of everything metaphysical to connect with my son led me to seeing mediums, going to thin places, traveling, groups, presentations, and keeping notes on all of this. And then on January 3rd of 2017, the anniversary of his crossing, I gotten in the habit of a couple times a month getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and going into his office, meditating, aligning my chakras, lighting sage, lighting candles. Now, if you look at the cover of the book, I brush cut and a kind of a bent nose. I don't look like a guy that would align my chakras and light sage, but I do. And on the anniversary, I started getting download messages from him telling me about heaven's light, telling me about the afterlife, telling me about crossing over. What sealed it for me that I just didn't think I was, losing my marbles was that he said to me, Pop, you got to forgive Scotty. I loved him. He loved me. He was a pal. And I thought, sure, Chris, for you, I'll forgive Scotty. Now, Scotty's a kid whose parents owned the lake house, and I'd been carrying a resentment for a year that they were to blame, which they weren't, but I had to be mad at somebody. So that moment, I promised him I'd let go of the resentment. Now, I wasn't ready to let go of the resentment, Betsy. I wanted to hold on to it for a while more. Let it age like fine wine. But he wanted me to, so I did. Fast forward 12 hours, I get a text from his college buddies. They say, Mr. McHugh, a bunch of us, they were in the fraternity together, are going to meet at Christopher's grave. A few of us, can you join us? And Sally and I were going to go at sundown together, but I said, sure, I'll come over. And I came there, and there were 40 kids, Betsy, at his grave. 40 kids, just impromptu at his grave. And one of those kids was Scotty, who I was able to embrace and tell him I love him. And he was just heartbroken. He didn't need me blaming him for this event. He was blaming himself enough, which was, like I said, it could have been my house, could have been your house, could have been anybody's house, But my son was preparing me for that moment, So he still comes through to this day, a couple times a month. I'll get awoken at 3 o'clock in the morning, go into my office, or I'm staying at my sister's house, who crossed 3 years ago, for a little bit, coming home next week, the end of this week actually, and I'll go out on the deck and start getting downloads from Chris at 3 a.m. And it's life lessons and important things that I should know and things that I need to share with parents who are hurting and grieving. And that's kind of become my mission now in this last lap around the track for me,
That is incredible, Joe. You might feel like how I feel. I can't say my late husband, Matt. I can't, because to me, Matt is still alive.
Yeah.
He's still with me. I don't mean alive as in physical form, but, I feel his presence every day. Excuse me. And I get signs from Matt. Now, people might think, I'm a little cuckoo, and that's okay. Like you said, not for everybody. But I've gotten signs, and I know that Matt is very much with me in spirit. And someone said to me last year, Betsy, you talk about Matt like he's still here. So to me, he is. He is still here, but it's different form.
Still here. I mean, it's what people got to get their arms around is that it's we're all energy. We take we're all energy, and energy doesn't die. So there was a movie called What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. And Robin Williams was a doctor who got killed in an accident. Cuba was the spirit guy. And to let Robin get his arms around the concept, Cuba, the spirit guide explained it this way. The origin of the word body is the Anglo-Saxon term bodig, meaning abode, which is what the physical body is, a transient dwelling for the real self. He said, like you're in your house right now. You're in your house. That doesn't mean you are your house. Your house falls down, you get out and walk away. And that's what happened. Your husband's temporary structure broke down. Christopher's temporary structure didn't serve anymore. So the spirit gets up and walks away. Now, they're right next to us. They're not far off in the heavens. Think about, the rice paper walls in a Japanese restaurant, right? That's how close they are. But most people have the problem with accepting that and doing the work that they've got to do to open up, to connect. So when I say I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's called the bewitching hour. That's spiritual, very active around those times. So I get woken up by him that he wants to send me some messages. Then I align my chakras, I meditate, I listen to a guided meditation. I light sage, I light candles, I look at pictures of him. I do all this to raise my consciousness, right? To raise the level of consciousness. So the spirits on the other side have to lower their level a little bit to be able to connect with us somewhere in the middle. But if you don't try to raise your consciousness, you're not going to be able to connect, right? You're not going to connect when you're balancing your checkbook. You're not going to connect when you're watching the hockey game. You've got to become in a meditative state. And I have people say, I can't meditate. I said, then quit complaining to me that you're not connected, because it's an important aspect of it,
Yes, that's true. And I was telling you before we recorded, I want to just suggest to the audience, check out my interview with Demetri Moratas, because this is exactly what we were talking about last week, and it's no coincidence that I am again talking to someone who has connections, who feels connected, and who gets signs from his son.
And downloads. Everything in both books that's italicized are words directly, exactly as Christopher sends them to me. Exactly, and they're undeniable. Things that he'll say that I forgot completely about, that he'll bring up about his youth or a lesson learned or what I need to share. It's undeniable that these are messages from somebody outside of me that I know as well as I know myself.
Well, that's incredible. So you get messages.
I get downloads
on download. That's just incredible to me, because sometimes I could feel like Matt is saying to me, "I'm here, Betsy, and you're okay. You're going to be okay." And
that's a message.
And that's a message. And I had to share the story with you, Joe, because this is mind-boggling. We had a rainstorm. This was not this summer. It was the summer before. And I got flooded. And I was laying in my bed. I was crying. And I had my shade down. I saw a big gold star. It wasn't coming in through the window because my window shade is down.
Right.
I saw a star. And I said, "That's you, Matt." And I felt like Matt was saying, "It's okay, Betsy. It's going to be okay." And I know what I saw. And I know. I never saw it again, but I know what I saw. And
and you don't need to see it again. Unless you get flooded,
right.
You're not going to need to see it again.
Yeah. It's really
the first anniversary at 3 a.m., his first download came. And because of what I do for a living, I had a legal pad on my desk and a pen on my desk. And I used, always have the same legal pad and the same type legal pad, the same type pen, because I don't want to break the tradition. But the first time he came through, he said, "It's like a beach, Pop, beautiful and pink, warm, but the colors are soft and vibrant. Pink, blues, and strong green. The air is warm surrounding us. It's air and love. It's love air everywhere. Nothing hurts. Warm and happy, always young. Miss you, Dad, but I'll see you soon enough." And it continued for 2 or 3 pages. But I just started writing. And I do the same thing. It'll do it 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll write the messages that he gives me, and then when he's done, he'll say, "Got to go, pulling back, time to go now." And then what I'll do is I'll spend the next 15, 20 minutes with a fine point pen, making sure that it's legible, and then I file it under date. And when I'm writing the books, I'll pull them out by date and transcribe them exactly as he said them to me. Exactly.
That's incredible. So you go around, and I'm sure you're such a comfort, Joe, to other parents who lost their children that they can't connect to their children. I mean, they're not, they can't hug them in the physical form, but they are there for them. And if they would just open up to the signs, they could be comforted somewhat by the signs that are given to them.
And they can. Now, the bottom line is I have all this amazing metaphysical information. I've written books. I speak to people. I do interviews. And I would give all of that up in a heartbeat to be able to go play a round of golf with Chris or go get a pizza and watch basketball or something. But what caused Christopher to transition is a bell that can't be unrung. So it's, what are you going to do? So what are you going to do about this? Now, as I said, not a bad guy, but I was just a different guy, than I am now. I live my life two ways, Betsy. I live my life to please my God and to make my son proud. There's another wonderful quote from a book called The Shack, which was actually turned into an amazing movie that your listeners should check out. And it's literally about a guy who lost a child in a horrific way, connecting with God of your understanding, And in this case, God was kind of a nurturing, loving African-American mother. And God said to this gentleman, just because I work incredible good out of unspeakable tragedies doesn't mean I orchestrate the tragedies. And that's important to know. I had to know that my God didn't take my son. I had an experience right after he drowned. And every day for that week, it was making arrangements for everything, from funerals to travel to all those things we talked about a couple minutes ago. And I would hit my knees at the end of the night, exhausted. And I would think, I've been sober 36 years. I was kind of a wild kid. That was a handful, as my wife would say. Now my wife never saw me drunk, and my kids never saw me drunk. It was quite a while. I got sober, I was 28 years old. So, so I get on my knees every night, and I always thank God for my family, and I thank God for my sobriety. But I would also say to God, but we're not good, you and me. You took my kid. And this went on for 3 days, and on the third day, I got a download from God, which was pretty nice, that said, I didn't take your son. His recklessness and free will caused him to come home early, and I welcomed him home. And remember, I lost a son too. So at that point, I knew that God wasn't making me pay for past sins or moving me around like a chess piece. I knew that God was holding me up in the time when I didn't know I could put one foot in front of the other to get things done. So at that point in time, my relationship with God improved dramatically. That I knew that, He wasn't a judging God. He was a loving Father. Grateful to have Him in my life. So that's what I said. When I live my life right now, is to please my God and to make my son proud. And as long as I follow those tenets, I can't go wrong.
That's beautiful, Joe. And I relate to that with the fact that I am quite a different person from caregiving for Matt and seeing him go through his journey, and I am now paying it forward. And you're not the same person. I don't say how you can be. When you lose, a child, a spouse, anybody, or go through a tragedy of some sort, you can't be the same person. And it's a mindset that I feel, in my opinion, whether it's going to make you a better person or a bitter person. It's up to us to choose.
Yeah.
And
it's going to happen. And it's reality. Mm-hmm. So it's your choice what you're going to do with it. But it's, I laugh because people go out of town for a weekend and they'll Google every restaurant, hotel, travel spot, whatever, in this destination that they're going for a weekend or a week. Yet we're all going to the other side. And if you ask most people, what's their interpretation of what's next, they're going to look at you and shrug. And I felt that way too. I didn't know, and it really didn't matter. I was so immersed in this world that I didn't care. And the bottom line is I get messages all the time that enjoy this world, but it's not what matters. Chris told me one time, he said, look, Pop, and he would call me Dad when it's serious and Pop when it's a little lighter. And he said, look, Pop, your world is great. Your world's fine. He said it's like football camp. There's a lot of work. There's a little bit of pain. You push yourself. You get beat up, but you're with your friends and you're testing yourself and you love it. That's your world. He said, my world is a beach bungalow on Maui. So what am I worried about when it's my time to go? I'm going to go from this world that I'm pretty happy with to a world of bliss beyond my wildest expectations. So, I'm okay with that one, Betsy.
Yes, yeah. I'm not sad for Matt, Joe. I'm happy that Matt is in heaven and he's having a great time. I'm sad sometimes for me. I don't like to live in sadness or stay there. But once in a while, we're human. We get sad. We miss them. And I'm like, you know what, Matt, especially what's going on in the world now, I said, I'm glad you are where you are. You're doing fine. And
whatever he had here, whatever malady that caused him to suffer here is done. When my sister Marcia was Christopher's godmother, and one of my favorite people in the whole world. She loved me when I wasn't even lovable, and Christopher was her godmother, and they adored each other, and Christopher adored his Aunt Marcia, and he said to me, "Don't worry, Pop. When she crosses, I'll be there." So her last 5-6 years were with cancer. She tried every treatment, she tried everything, and at the end she said, "I'm done. I've taken my run at this. It's time to go." So one thing that was very important to me is I was there a few days before she transitioned, and she said to me one night, "Honey, Joey," she called me Joey. She said, "Joey, you gave me the greatest gift. I read your book, and I'm not afraid to die." And when Christopher said, "Pop, I'll be there the minute she transitions," he came back after her anniversary, which was February 6, 2019, and he said, "We were all there. Jerry, Billy, Pat, Diane, Bobby, Carrie. We were all there to greet Marcia. But then she had to go somewhere, like a spa. And when she came back, she was younger than when I was a kid." So this is another reason I'm not smart enough to figure this out. When I figured it out, I'm not smart enough to originate this thought. So what he told me, once I meditated on it, was that the cancer stayed with her body on this side, but the trauma crossed with her. So she had to go somewhere, like a spa, where that trauma that was in your husband's life, his life, anybody whose kid had a disease or malady or depression or addiction, they go somewhere, and when they return, that's gone, right? They're healed of those afflictions. And I thought, man, and she joined the family. And then they said, "And when you join us, the circle will be complete because I'm the last of the siblings."
Wow, I think it's so incredible, Joe, when people who are transitioning, or even before. My husband saw his mom, dad, and brother who are deceased 7 months before he passed away. Yeah. And it's like you try to explain this to people. Like he would actually say his mom came to visit him, his brother, his dad, and he didn't mention his sister because his sister's still alive.
Right.
And the veil gets lifted. And he even saw his dog 2 weeks before he went up to the hospice unit. He saw his dog.
Yeah.
And I know that he saw his dog.
Christopher's with the dog that helped raise him. And he's mentioned that. And mediums have said there's a big white dog here. And she was an 80-pound yellow lab, very light. And we know Christopher's with Casey. And we've been told that by mediums, by him. Actually, he said to me, Casey's here, and we both really, really loved you, but she loves me more now. He's still the same kind of kid, where you're just a little bit of a bust your stones a bit, and I know that it's a family event. And I did in the second book, I did stuff on, I wrote a chapter on near-death experiences where people, the loved ones come to just let them know that they're not going to be alone on this path. That all they got to do is, it's like letting go and sliding down a water slide, Betsy. That's what it's like. You've got to let go. And once you let go, you slide down this wonderful water slide, and then you're on the other side, and you're with all the people that you're going to be with for how many lifetimes, It's the term that I keep getting from mediums, from Chris, from downloads is blissful. Where they are is blissful.
Yes. That's why I don't feel bad for Matt. I really don't.
You and me. I know. And I do by the way, anybody who said time heals all wounds never lost a kid, right? So I have many breakdowns every day where I just miss the hell out of him in the flesh and the heck out of him in the flesh, right? I miss him. And here's something interesting. I've had mediums tell me, or I've researched mediums that say that the spirits on the other side don't miss us because they're around us. And I've had Chris come through and said, they're wrong, Pop. I do miss you. I miss you in the flesh, even though I'm around you in spirit. I do. He said, I miss Mom. I miss my dog, Cassidy. It was the dogs on this side preparing to join. He said, I miss my Jeep. So they do miss things of the flesh. Doesn't mean they're not happy. Doesn't mean they're not blissful. You and I can look back and miss something from our childhood, even if we're happy in this moment. So, it's interesting because not everything that I've researched is always accurate, and he's contradicted a few things like that.
Yes, and what's important for people to know, Joe, is I feel that just because we talk about our loved ones who are gone physically, doesn't mean we're sad. Doesn't mean we're drowning in grief. I talk about Matt because how can I not talk about my husband who I was with for 39 years? How do you not talk about your child that you had for 21 years? And I think we should always talk about our loved ones and honor them and their memory. And you're doing that, and I'm doing that. And I just think that people need to realize that, we will always, I always say this to people in my group, we will always love and miss our loved ones. There is no doubt about that. Unless, of course, you don't like the person who went, then you may not. But, you will always love and miss.
What's kind of hurtful, more to Sally than me, because she's probably a nicer person than I am, is that when people think they shouldn't mention your boy, right, or your case, your husband. It's like I've had people in loving way, meaningful, and saying, I just didn't want to bring it up and remind you. I said, you got to understand, that pain is with me every day, despite the fact that he's fine, right? That loss is with me. It's not like you're reminding me. It's like, oh, wow, I forgot that I lost a kid, right? So, so I love it when people come up and tell me about incidents they had when they were younger or when Chris came over to their house. That doesn't hurt. That makes me smile. So I encourage your listeners, if you know somebody who's lost somebody, don't hesitate to bring up a story or their name. We really honor that. Right. That's honoring that spirit. That's warming to us parents,
Yes, that. Oh my goodness, Joe, I just love you. That's so true. I spent you over the phone, and I love you already. That's so true. 100% agree, because people, they do have that mindset. Well, if I mention your loved one's name, it will upset you. Well, you know what? I might cry because I'm remembering a sweet memory, not because I'm sad. But I welcome people. Talk about our loved ones. We want to hear their name and story.
What I'm getting together I've been down in Florida for a little bit, and I'll be coming back. And Chris's fraternity buddies and guys and gals are still close, and they're like family to us now. Since this, they're part of everything we do, and they have a pub crawl in his honor on his birthday, right? And it's just 30 years sober, I'm not going to do a lot of pub crawling. I'll buy some pictures, but I'm around them, and what they'll do is they'll be telling stories about Chris and living and laughing. I have a golf outing that for charity, that and we talk. Everybody tells stories, and it's just on his anniversary of his transitioning, 23rd. We all meet at the grave January 3rd, in Chicago. It's pretty cold. We all meet at the grave, then come over to the house for a little reception, and it's everybody has little pockets, right? Little pockets of groups talking about their story. Remember when this happened? Remember when he did this? Remember McQuillen did that? And it just makes us happy. It makes us proud, and it fills our heart. So don't ever hesitate. I actually wrote a chapter about that. That don't hesitate to bring it up. You're not doing anybody's favor when you're not bringing it up, right?
That's true. We do live with the pain of missing our loved ones, and that is with us. I will grieve the loss of Matt until I die myself. But but life is for the living, and I know Matt would want me to be happy, and I know that he's happy because I'm continuing with my work. Because when Matt was dying, I promised him that I would continue on, that it was okay for him to go. We'll be okay. And
I live a life beyond my wildest dreams. I adore my children. I adore my wife. She's a brilliant therapist and wonderful gal, and I miss her because I've been in Florida for a little bit, and I'll be home soon. And I just adore her, and I have a wonderful life. But I go through life with a little piece of my heart broken, and I just know that, and you can't deny it. And it's not going to go away with time. It's just the way it is. And I got to tell you, but because of what I know, because of what I know is next, because of these relationships and conversations with Chris, that I don't in any way fear. I mean, I'm not ready to go. I have parents to help. My kids still need me, adore my wife. But when it's time to go, and God taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, pal, you're pitching tomorrow. On the other side," I'm okay with that because I get to spend the next go-round with Chris. There's a Scribbles and Crumbs that says we talk about them, not because we're stuck or because we haven't moved on, but we talk about them because we are theirs and they are ours, and no passage of time will ever change that. How's that?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's why we talk about them.
That is beautiful. I so enjoy talking to you, Joe. You are a beautiful man, and you're doing a beautiful work, helping parents and people who have lost their loved ones and giving them a sense of I want to say hope. Because you get because the signs, and you're right, and I'm glad, Joe, that you. Because I don't have many men on here talking about losing their child and how they felt, but to validate, you just validated how you felt, and this is what I tell people: you need to validate your feelings. You're going to feel this pain for the rest of your life, but you don't have to be live. I mean, you feel it, but you can't let it control you. You have to enjoy life.
Every day.
That's what that's what your loved ones would want you to do.
And Chris has told me, why he pushed me to write the book is he said, "Dad, fathers need this. Mothers somehow can find a way to comfort each other, but fathers think they're supposed to do this alone. You need to get to them. You need to let them know it's okay to drop the rock." He tells me. And then he said, "And you're a good ambassador because of who you are." Once again, I'm kind of a hard-nosed guy. right? You know, and I'm a regular guy on this amazing journey. And I want anybody listening to this, join me on the journey, you know. And go to JoeMcQuillen.net is a website. And there's a lot of great interviews, and there's, you know, some tips for how to connect, steps for connecting with somebody on the other side. You know, Amazon has both books, Joe McQuillen, and specifically the first one I think is real important if you're starting off on this journey, because it's kind of a how-to for dummies. You know, it's kind of a blue-collar version of, you know, right from the ground up, you know, what it's like. And what the message that I'm carrying is really what you just said. It's hope and comfort, you know, and your kids aren't gone. Your loved ones aren't gone. Your husband, Matt's not gone. In a different format, it's nowhere near as good for us. It's much better for them. But they're not gone. So honor that and find what you can do to connect.
Yes. I just love talking to you, Joe. I have to tell you, I have to share this real quick. What my son Josh, what we do on Matt's birthday is I order a birthday cake, and we sing to Matt happy birthday. And we, you know, honor Matt on Father's Day. We get a favorite ice cream. And, you know, I talk to Matt all the time like he's still here. I
will tell you this, because he is still there. And those efforts that we make, you know, I go to his grave all the time. And it's not like some old man feeding pigeons, right? I sit there, I have a cigar, I've got my dog with me. I always keep his stone pristine. You know, there's always little mementos from friends. And those things that we do, they feel it. They like it. They're grateful for that you're keeping that spirit part. It's not wasted, those efforts. Those efforts aren't just for you. They feel it on the other side, because he's told me that.
Wow. Well, thank you, because that makes me feel that I'm on the right, that I am doing the right track, I am doing the right thing.
Yeah,
because,
and keep it up. Keep it up.
Yes. Yeah. It was a couple of weeks after Matt had passed, and Josh said, Mom, can I go to a hockey game? I said, of course. Your father loved hockey. You know he would want you to go to a hockey game. Yeah. You know, I encourage my son to, you know, you have to enjoy life. And I told Josh, I said, because we're very open with our grieving, you will always miss your dad. But your dad wants you to have fun, and that's the way to honor him.
And when I'm golfing, I feel Chris around me all the time. I talk to him when I'm golfing. You know, my buddies are like-minded guys like me. They're all guys, but wonderful hearts and jump through hoops to help you. And you know, they're all in tune with what I'm talking about. None of them look at me like I went off the reservation, right? They all buy into what it is. And then they connect to how it affects their, you know, with their parents who have lost or their loved ones, you know. And it's kind of, we just keep expanding the circle, you know, and that's why the veil is thinning.
I have to ask you this, Joe. What do your children think of your connection with Chris?
You know, they honor it. You know, my son William they've both seen mediums. They've both got messages from Chris. You know, Caroline's 25 and William's 22, and I think it's hard to absorb at that age. I mean, you know, how much spirituality was I running around with at 25? You know, so I think, you know, Christopher has told me that he's working with them, but they've got to be more open. You know, so I'll say things like, you know, everybody's got their own path, right? I can't impose my path, but they all validate. They all know that it's true. They all know it's part of it. It's very painful for both those kids, and they don't have the spiritual awareness that comes from 65 years on this planet that I think, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Right. You know, so Chris is working with them, you know, and I think he rolls his eyes sometimes, like, you know, but you know, they certainly aren't skeptics. You know, they believe.
Oh, that's great. I was curious about that. And your wife, how does she feel about?
She, Chris comes to her. He doesn't come to her the way I do. She feels him. She's a brilliant gal, and she just about done with her first book, and she's and they had a wonderful, really, Chris came to me for a lot of things, advice, help, but when his heart was broken or he was sad, or he'd run to his mama, and that was a great place. So they connect. I get this gift of actually getting downloads, and I believe I get that because I'm a perfect ambassador to spread it around, right? I think there's there's a lot of women who are connected like this, and it's not that uncommon, but it is for a guy's guy. So the impact is there. Plus, I do believe after 6 years of research that Christopher and I had spent past lives together as well. Sally, he's around Sally. She feels him. He tells me. Mediums have told her. She's around Sally, and she has an office in the house that he hangs around in her office a lot. He loves that she's helping people. She's completely on board and probably my biggest fan.
Well, that's great. Oh, thank you so much, Joe McQuillen, for coming on Chatting with Betsy. And I want to thank you for writing your 2 books, for honoring your son's life and helping people. I love people who help other people and have a passion. You clearly have a passion. And I just, wish you the best. Look forward to another one of your books. And you know where you can come for an interview. You can come right here. Be very happy to interview you again. And I just want to tell my audience, if you missed any of this podcast, you can catch it wherever you hear your favorite podcast. And please subscribe to Chatting with Betsy so you don't miss great interviews, such as Joe McQuillen and other people that I have on. And it's free to subscribe. I'm on Spotify, Spreaker, CastBox, wherever you hear a podcast. And the information about Joe McQuillen will be in the blog, so please read the blog. I want to thank Jeannie White, who's station manager, who writes the blog and produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And thanks to Sarah Scarlett, Scarlett Publicity, for arranging this interview. And I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening and sharing. Please share to help other people, because this is what Chatting with Betsy is about. It's paying it forward, and it's passing on resources and people who can help you. And that's what I'm here for. And I want to thank just everyone for your support and listening. And where you could be anything you want in the world, please be kind. This is your host, Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy and Passion World Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.